Exploring the unknown, from conspiracies to mysteries, you are entering the conspiracy sector.
Well, welcome everyone to this very special program. I am your host, Aubrey Batchelor. Sailing this amazing ship of knowledge with me is Chris Jacobs, and you are entering the conspiracy sector. Well, like always, we hope you've been well since the last episode, and we got another doozy for you. Quite an interesting story that revolves around an alien race. Chris, how you been?
Doing all right. Because of this topic, there's been some mental harassment going on, but nothing we haven't been able to handle. So,
Yeah, we dive deep into the world of strangeness yet again. And you guys are sure to enjoy this one. And I'm going to get right into it and just share a little article here about this. And the topic that we're going to talk about today is Charles C. Hall and the Tall Whites. And for people that aren't aware of it, this man had quite an interesting relationship with the tall white alien race. And there's a few interviews about him on YouTube. If anybody's bored after they hear this episode, they can go listen to it and get a little bit bigger of an in-depth view of what his actual career involvement was with everything. But it's quite interesting from the aspect of how they're human-like, but they're way more advanced than what we are. And yet it's another story of technological exchanges between the American government and an alien race. And I don't know, do you remember the honorary Paul Hellyer up in Canada? Him,
yes, yes. So
he
when he came forward to talk about this, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and yeah, I think he knows quite a bit more than what he's leading on to. I used to listen to him talk on a show called The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serrett, and he'd interview him about once every 2 months, and he'd dive on into different alien races and UFO topics like the Shag Harbor incident up in Canada. And uh, I don't know if he's still alive. I need to Google him. I haven't researched him yet, but I remember him talking about certain subjects, and it's similar to what Charles C. Hall, Paul Hellyer didn't have a close relationship like C. Hall did, but I think he had the information close to what C. Hall had.
Yeah, and I
And
believe Paul Hilliard, I saw reports where he passed away, and then I saw somewhere he was still alive. So either we have a Mandela thing
well,
effect thing going on, or missing disinformation going on, one
he's
of the two,
a Canadian Nelson Mandela.
basically.
Uh, this is an article from Medium.com, and it's by Noah Heydrich, and it gives a pretty good overview of this storyline of what we're going to be talking about back and forth here. But Charles Hall was a contactee who was an airman who worked at Nelis Field in Indian Springs, Nevada throughout the 1960s. Enlisting in 1964, later he was sent to Vietnam and patriotically served his country in that war. I've heard many people online discuss him and criticize him as a liar or a kook. However, I believe his testimony to be legitimate. Like I do. Like I said, this is what I said. Go back and listen to his interview. And he has a very genuine voice. He's very calm about it. He knows what he's talking about. It'd be tough to make up. He deserves an award for if
Mhm.
he's acting through it, no doubt about it. But in fact, I found his testimony to be some of the most legitimate of any of the genuine contactees I have found. It was his case that verified for me that ET contact is real and proven as a reality. A few years ago, I had an email exchange with him about the tall whites technology, and he confirmed parts of his story for me. Who is he? He's born in Wisconsin in the mid part of the 20th century. He had a difficult and strange upbringing, although in many ways it was like other boys of the era. Later, he joined the Air Force and was stationed at Indian Springs, Nevada, near Las Vegas, as a weather observer. And we all know the strange stories that have happened. I don't mean to do a 180, but did you hear about the obelisk that was out in Las Vegas that they found in the desert out there again? Yet
Yep.
another strange obelisk that appears and vanishes like a thief in the night.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
so that was a little bit strange. However, what he did there was definitely more than just the weather. In his memoir, Millennial Hospitality, he describes how he was often alone in the ranges until he started seeing horse-shaped lights in the distance. The legends of locals range for Harry, and a radioactive horse pervaded, especially since this was close to the Nevada test range where nuclear testing was conducted. He was terrified and thought he was hallucinating or crazy, yet he still went out on the ranges like he was ordered. Eventually, he learned that they were radioactive, not a horse, but humanoid extraterrestrials that wore bright outfits that could float. The tall whites were normally human-sized but could grow up to 7 or 8 feet tall in the old age, were very thin, and had a pale white complexion. They wore human clothes, however, also wore bright suits that allowed them to float. They had white tic-tac shaped spacecraft that could float silently and travel thousands of kilometers an hour. He noticed that the schedule of their deep black spacecraft that flew on the schedule of the moon. Here we have interstellar technology that is just way more advanced than what a human being can on Earth can almost even grasp, really,
Mhm.
when it comes to their technological advances. He eventually befriended some and believed that they came from a star close to the Arcturus in the constellation Bootes. There were difficult situations like the woman Pamela that he met that shot him with what was basically a phaser, a microwave beam weapon that incapacitated him. In fact, the technology the Tall Whites possessed isn't that different from Battlestar Galactica, Star Wars, or Star Trek. The teacher who was guided to their culture and people, and in many ways they weren't all that different from modern Americans. However, in other ways they are quite distinct. They didn't eat meat, they were only vegetarian, could be capricious or caring, and they also read Charles' mind with the help of technology they used, like Alan from the White Sands incident, and that's kind of a strange one too. But their appearance reminds me of the Castellan from the sci-fi series Defiance, or the engineers from Prometheus. And that's kind of strange too. That's a good movie too to kind of
Mhm.
gravitate back to the tall whites. Blue eyes, tall, pale white, thin, and gaunt. Hall states that they have been here for a very long time, at least since James Madison was president, and they can live up to 600 years old. And I've heard reports 800 years old, some of the oldest,
Mhm.
meaning they could have been here since the 18th century at least. They looked human enough and they walked into Las Vegas to gamble with sunglasses and makeup and not to be noticed. Charles himself has stated that there are enough weird-looking people in Vegas that they wouldn't be noticed. And that's kind of crazy to think about, but yeah. These tall whites could be brave and be befriended them despite the mutual fear. I wish Charles learned more about what was going on in the dusty desert days when he was out there. Evidence. However, the skeptics will immediately retort Charles Hall is a fraud or a liar because they don't want the truth. This isn't true. I can prove it. First, the military records he has in his books prove that he was at Nelis and was in the military doing some of what he claimed he did. Read the books yourself and determine this for yourself. He wasn't lying about that. His service record speaks for itself. He was stationed at Nellis as an airman. Secondly, poet Lara Harris, the noted researcher, has done extensive research on Charles, even talking to him or taking him out to Indian Springs again so he can guide her to where the ranges were located. Many describe him as intelligent, likes to play chess, and experience something strange, confirming the legends of Range 4 Harry. Key parts of Hall's story, like the building of an underground spacecraft for the Tall Whites, are documented in newspaper articles of the time. According to the article, around $300 million were spent. Inflation adjusted, that would be around $3.5 billion today. And I just want to do a kind of a 180 here and go back to what we talked about Phil Schneider and all of his underground alien and military based discussions. How he
Mhm.
talked about the expenditures and the aliens living on Earth. They're here right underneath us.
I feel, yeah, he encountered the same race as Charles Hall did.
Very
Yeah.
well could have. What kind of simple housing facility cost $3.5 billion? For reference, the nearby housing complex at Fort Bliss cost $4.8 billion, housing more than 37,000 soldiers and 10 million square feet of space. And my nephew's actually stationed down at Fort Bliss in El Paso.
Hmm.
Uh, it has 10 million square feet of space there. However, Fort Bliss is like a small city. It was more like they were building a small city out in Indian Springs than simply barracks. Indian Springs today, Creech Air Force Base, has some facilities, but nothing that seems like it would have cost that amount back then. So it has to be underground or something along that line, hidden in plain sight. Uh, There's a little right in the middle of this article. There's a little newspaper cutout. Indian Springs Protect key to the defense plans. The Indian Springs project, preliminary work on which already has begun, will not be an A-bomb program, but definitely will be tied into the defense plans. It was learned from authoritative sources this morning. The contract, which recently was awarded to the McKee Construction Company, is a preliminary project, it was stated, and is for the construction of housing facilities at the Indian Springs base. It is understood from reliable Washington sources that the overall expense of constructing the project may run somewhere around 300 million and will be even larger than the huge basic magnesium plant that is a construction job in southern Nevada. The actual details of the program are cloaked in a security blackout, and no information will be released regarding the use to which the construction will be uh, outed when it's completed. So there's a lot of hidden agenda type stuff going on around here, and not just there. They're polka dotted all over the world, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh yeah, yeah, they are.
Paolo's research is the most extensive and indicates to me that Charles was telling the truth in part in regard to his experiences near Las Vegas. David Coote also interviewed some of Charles's military colleagues, and they remembered Charles and the legends about the tall whites. I myself have done research and found what could be the tall white scout spacecraft in the mountains near the ranges Charles talked about. There's a little picture here on Google Maps. It just looks like a little spacecraft right in the middle of the mountains there.
I don't see anything coming through on the share screen if you're sharing. So
No, yeah, it says let me get here. There it comes. Sorry.
There we go.
Here's your little picture. Now you can see what I just read. That little dot right here.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be a show sometime too. We could just talk about strange Google Map picture sightings and everything.
Oh yeah, that would be a great show to do on the strange Google Maps
people
sites.
have found. That's a huge rabbit hole if you dive into it. But Hall's other experiences. Hall had encounters with other aliens, like the typical grays close to desert center California. Some of them had green, yellowish skin and were possibly reptilian in origin, as well as a human group he calls Norwegians with 24 teeth, whom he encountered in his youth. They look exactly like humans from Northern Europe, and Charles himself surmised he was related to them genetically. They arrived from a nearby red dwarf star, contacted Edward Teller, and wanted to build a spacecraft in Scandinavia. Incidentally, this confirms the information in the book by Lisa Royal, The Prism of Lyra, which states that humans from the constellation of Lyra off-world colonized Earth centuries ago and gave rise to different human races, as the book describes it. It could be that South Park was right, and Charles Hall is just one among many confirming this. Legends among Native Americans of ancestors from the stars abound, like the Hopi, and the legends of Chahukan. Charles outright states that northern Scandinavian people like the Sami and Finnic peoples also have descent from those off-world humans. Whether he is right, I don't know. However, I do believe this. Charles was honest about his experiences. Robert Bigelow, the noted investigator, also believes the same in a 60 Minutes interview he gave. So there's a lot of correlating back and forth information between people that have delved in and had experiences with the weird and strange. And going back to what we said in the beginning, if you listen to his interviews that he gives, he does seem very honest, open-hearted about his life experiences out in the desert there. So it gives you a little bit of an overview about who Charles C. Hall was and what he experienced. So we'll kind of dive on into some of the tall white lore.
Yeah, this is actually quite an interesting topic. Now, what was interesting, you brought up the descendants of Lyra. You know, they created outposts here on all over the planet. This was thousands and thousands of years ago. It was basically, if you see the show the Thundercats from all the years ago, Thundercats,
I am Lion-O, leader of the Thundercats.
Yes, and who are they running from in that? A big mummy and a black pyramid, because the Orions destroyed their homeworld and they had to migrate. It was telling the story of the Lyran Exodus is really what that show is talking about. And a lot of humans have Lyran DNA, but you have this specific group, which is actually quite fascinating. It coincides also with what Elaine and Vessa told me, because they are in the same general vicinity as the tall whites. You have Red Rock Canyon, Valley of Fire, Nelis, and it's from my point of view. It's flipped if you're seeing this, but north of Vegas, you have Valley of Fire, where the famous drawing that I had done is depicting Brub right there. And what happens is they're also Nordic-esque looking. All these races are interrelated. The tall whites that we're referring to now, the more hostile-like ones, when I came in contact with them years ago, they called themselves the Lancaneers, and they said they were the tall whites of Nelis that Charles Hall contacted, and they were very aggressive, very, very arrogant, and very, very hostile. Even if you got something slightly wrong about what they were saying,
They'd turn malevolent.
Yeah, yeah. Like if you like, I know there's more likely good ones out there, and there's cousin races like Land and Vesta that are wonderful. It's just that then you always get a bad apple out of the group. And what happens is now you have, this is the whole map of where some of the races are. You have Land and Vesta's people, Valley of Fire, Red Rock Canyon. Vegas is neutral. It has a bunch of races that go through there, like a spaceport, because you have deep underground military base right under the strip there. When it was being built, anybody that actually looked down into the hole while they were building it were actually shot, believe it or not, by the secret projects right on site there. Nelis has the tall white aliens, and they have little homes up in the hills too. Lane and Vessa have similar, where in fact they have more the Adobe look, and like how we would decorate it and deck it out, and it'd be awesome. The tall whites have a similar Adobe little shed-like tiny house-like thing going on, but they're more Spartan in their decor. They're more bland. So you can see similarities in architecture. And Elena and Vesta told me her people migrated here. They're descendants of the people that originally migrated here, and they told me they settled in the Vegas area in the late 1800s. So this coincides with what you just said. And also, when we encountered the tall whites originally, some of them were white skinned, some of them looked human with dark or blonde hair, and some of them had sometimes this silvery skin, like you painted like a paint marker over their skin. And some looked like them, regular human. Lyrans are that way too, either cat-like or human-looking. And some have the eyes like a cat, and some have human eyes. Saranan and or Cassiopean groups have like cat-like eyes, the squiggle eyes, or goat-looking like eyes, where they have that weird squiggle like hourglass look to them. And then some have normal. I found out the eyes change when they enter our sun, under our sun, to look exactly like we have them. It's something with the DNA and also the radiation of our sun that changes that. The thing, though, when I first came in contact with them, which was really, I thought this was something really stupid when I came across it. I didn't realize how profound this detail was until very recently. Where when the Lancaneers first came to me, they said, we're space horses. And I had no freaking clue what the hell they were talking about. I'm like, okay, I don't know what the hell that means. Then with the thing with Charles Hall seeing the horse he thought was a radioactive glowing horse, and it ended up being one of the tall whites, I was like, okay, they were making a big reference to the lore. And I'm like, okay, this actually makes sense. They telepathically contacted us while we were in Nebraska. And they're through the bases in Nebraska. They actually have homes there, just like the Ebens have homes down in Sandia. You have the tall whites, like what I said in the previous episode. You have tall whites in New Mexico. You have Zeta Ebens that are New Mexico from Zeta Reticuli. And you have Arizona, which has Lancaneer / tall whites. You have Lyran descent lineages, both good and bad. And people like to try to go to these people for esoteric wisdom, which they're no different than any of us. Some of them are assholes, some of them are good. And further down in Arizona, you have more cat races. Sedona, you have cat races there. You have Sasquatch, you have Syrian elf type dark elf, like from the Scandinavian mythology. They're with the teal, dark blue, dark blue skin with pink or bluish tone. And they're kind of all interrelated. Some lot of species mixed when they came into this sector of space, kind of thing. But then you have Lancaneer presence or tall white presence that goes down into the Yuma proofing grounds and down into the base down in there, from what I understand. New Mexico, like I said, is mostly dominated by the Zeta Ebens, but you and also some cat races, and then you have the tall white, which is the rest of it, and that's where you get the Dolce incident that we were talking about before. They were so hostile because Zeta security forces can be hostile too, but so you can't really tell one from another. It's just like the man that wrote the book. Let me look at the name again. Come on. Oh yeah, the guy that wrote the book Communion, A True Story, which is Whitley Strieber is his name. He actually was talking more about the Ebens, the same ones that Betty and Barney Hill were abducted by from Zeta Reticuli. And he talks about how they put an implant in his ear, and that's how they communicated. A doctor tried to remove it, and it moved along here. I even had an incident recently where, and my mother did too, where we were feeling something was in our ear. And I attributed this, if people saw the lifting episode we did on Vincent Van Gogh, and I found out he was part of my soul circle. I thought it was primarily just a past life, there. But the aliens were ear marking, Isaac always tells a joke, ear marking, because they think of us as cattle. So it's ear marking. So I felt something was in my ear, and I know something had been removed because I had an old scar tissue under my right earlobe from a dog bite years ago, and something it kept draining right here, and something was going wrong there. They were marking not only the past life I had with Van Gogh, but mirroring Van Gogh, but they were also earmarking me because they're dickheads. But this and they did this to my mother too, and now I know this was the same race. Stryber encountered Ebens, but these two are kind of interchangeable. But the thing is, when we first started communicating, we trusted some of the information foolishly that they were giving us. Later on, doing more due diligent research, I came to find out that they're prolific liars too. So, did they come from Boots? So they claim. They could their original site of point of origin, I believe, would be around the Booties or Boots, but or Arcturus. But a lot of channelers feel like, the Arcturians are this big top race that's out there and everything. They're mixing up with some Lyran races, the tall whites, and Orion, like generation 2 or 3, generation 3, which are like these Nordic, like Nazi-looking types. They're all interrelated, and they were all created by the same source, which would be Orion. The Zeta Ebens created the Lancaneers / tall whites as lab familiars and assistants. They genetically created them out of all the DNA library that they had, including Lyran too, and some Elven, like the Dark Elf, all of it. That's where you get the mixture of all these different things, gray races and everything. What happened was that race rebelled against them after a while, and they wanted their own planet. At that time, it would have been in the Boots, but then some migrated to Earth, and I believe mainly you are dealing with descent lineage. You're dealing with some newbies, but you're dealing mainly with descent lineages of a lot of these different groups from a long time ago. The Orion Wars that came before that, of course, Lyra exploded. I found out that's back too, or at least an outpost of theirs. And the beginning of the Thundercats TV series was talking about the Lyran Exodus. And roughly within that same time frame, it was 500,000 years ago. So that's essentially what that series was depicting. The Lyrans would probably be a good one to touch on for a future show too. But and some of the Orion War conflict. But this specific incident at Nelis, I know damn well he was telling the truth, because the base that's in Nebraska, that's under Omaha, Lincoln, these beings are quite prolific there, along with the Zeta Ebens and some other gray variations that are there. And I won't go too much into the Zeta Ebens. That could be their own show, but I've encountered them as well. I felt a telepathic signal there, along with some of the Lancaneer presences. I'll save that story for the Eben show, because it's too elaborate. It would be its own show. But we were sitting on for the Lancaneer presence. We were sitting on Fletcher. People knew we lived at Links in Lincoln before we moved to Arizona originally, and we encountered as I was doing. I used to do a show called Diamonds 31 back then, and I was a lot more green when it came to some of the channeling incidences and some of the contacts and everything. But I'm a lot more anal retentive and cautious now. But some people think I'm being too anal, but no, it's safety issues. But with this, we've sensed a group of these tall whites coming in, and some had hair, some didn't. Uh, and they had larger eyes. They looked like us, but then like I said, they had that silvery like paint like texture on them. Some had blonde hair, some had blue eyes. Some they were a variation of what you were talking about earlier. And this is actually kind of like an earmarking, no pun intended, of what they do. They're harsh testers. They always said they were testing people on their resolve to withstand abuse. And I don't agree with this type of testing. It's too over the top for me. They only respected humans that could go toe to toe with them, like some reptilian species do. And that's also the Draco are probably their own episode too. But it's they only respected you if you could handle their abuse equal to them, and it became obnoxious after a while. And I noticed coming up doing this episode, coming up to this episode. See, I'm even stammering while I'm talking about this. There's been some mental harassment from not only for us, but for some friends of ours too, and not wanting this information to be collated with this particular topic. It's been I can handle them because I've been around them, but this is going to be kind of the funny part here. When I first encountered them, my brain wasn't decoding what they looked like. Right, I was seeing like this weird disembodied head, like they were a Muppet or something. I didn't really know what the hell this was, and it was their psionic energy, their psychic energy, or telekinetic energy they were projecting into the space, and because they wanted to communicate. And the military was harassing us right on par with them. The military seems to think they're in charge, but those particular aliens treat them as meat puppets, pretty much. And they think they're in charge. In some cases, that's true. The military are mostly doing stagecrafting, but this race, though, I would not advise to anyone looking into this. Do not telepathically contact them. Do not put thoughts out there, I should say, to contact them because you're curious. The same goes with the Zeta Ebens, because these two groups, the Zetas will either abduct you or the Lancaneers will harass you. So do not under any circumstances communicate with them. But I do want to clarify that Lana Vessa's people are different than these guys. They might be related on some genetic level. They have artistic similarities. They have architectural similarities. They have look similarities. But Vegas is a melting pot. When we went there, I will make one more point. When we went to Vegas, we encountered not only Grays there on the strip, but I heard some voices in the ether trying to get us to go into a particular hotel while we were there. It's called the Mirage. And I found out the Mirage, it's aptly named, because the Mirage is an entry point to the Dumbs base that is underneath the strip. Mirage, like trick out in the open, illusion, meaning entry point to the base. And where these aliens are coming and going from. If you want to find where they're coming and going, if you are curious enough and you want to stick the fork in the light socket, the Mirage. So that's where they come and go. That's why we were drawn to the Vegas area. And Elaine and Vessa's people come and go from Valley of Fire and Red Rock Canyon. There's also Syrian elf types that live out that way. There's also the tall whites that live out that way. But the portal that I showed you in that picture of theirs is an entry point to a dimensional space where Land and Vesta's people are, called the Interverse. That's a show in and of itself. The nesting doll, worlds within worlds, convergence of the spheres. or Conjunction of the Spheres, like from Witcher. That's a totally different show. But I know this was long-winded, everybody, but this was our backstory coming
Mm-hmm.
across this particular species. Again, I would not advise in a million years coming in contact with the tall whites, because they will make your life hell. At least the ones we encountered. I don't doubt there are good sects and cousin variations like Lena Vess's variation, because they also have some human in there as well. But they, you can't basically judge an entire species by a few bad apples. But the ones out of Nelis, don't bother trying to communicate with them. They are very hostile. The Zeta Ebens out of Sandia, I know people channel them on a regular basis. Don't bother.
And,
That's a cautionary tale. I already stuck that fork in the light socket. You don't need to, you know.
Now, the interesting thing I find out too is all the different movies and games that portray kind of these interstellar beings. And the one that I like to think of whenever we start talking about this topic is like all the characters you can play as in like Skyrim and Oblivion and all those games. I mean, it just seems like there's
Mm-hmm.
there's all this disclosure through, games and movies and TV shows and everything along that line. Even commercials nowadays are, getting us prepped and ready, showing different alien races and
Mm-hmm.
uh
Yeah, that's soft disclosure or direct disclosure, like cat litter commercial where you see this guy that's a cat that's dancing on a dance floor. That's Lyran variation. The show, I believe, uh, Resident Alien. That's talking about beings like the tall whites and Ebens and such, Venusians and everything that are living in homes and neighborhoods with us. People of Earth, the same thing. Skyrim, all the races there, and the Elder Scrolls. The Elven variations are either Syrian, Scandinavian, Elf
hmm
variation, tall white, and also you have
Nordic,
Draconian,
reptilian,
reptilian, all of it. Yeah, you have all of these different variations that some are
human.
good, like the Falmer, for instance, in Skyrim, are a degenerated version of the Greenland elf types. So that you saw the white elf, snow elf types, and you saw the Falmer were like a degenerated version of one you meet in Skyrim in the Dawnguard DLC by the name of Galador. And he says their species degenerated into another feral type race. That's actually a true story of a tall white variation that one degenerated and one stayed fine. So, or an elven variation. So that's actually a true story that was being depicted in the story. Same thing with and I will divert just a little bit with Akatosh, Alduin, and Parthenex are supposed to be Enki, Enlil, and Anu from the Sumerian mythology. So they've integrated all of it in the Viking mythology, and it was beautifully done. How they disclosed things in that game. You want to see some disclosure of races? Look no further than Skyrim and Oblivion. So it's that's I know I diverted a little, but this is a subject that we've encountered quite
Can you
prolifically.
think of any like soft disclosure forms that revolve around these tall whites, like some most prominent ones that might depict these tall whites in movies or
Uh,
anything?
well, the show People of Earth did, where you saw this white-haired, like Nordic-looking guy that was in that. That's what some of these Lankaneer and tall white forms look like. Uh, that's actually a beautiful example of one of them. They made him like kind of human-like, where he was bantering back and forth like a regular person. He was a bit arrogant. Also, the elves in Skyrim are actually more Orion, like Stage One Orion, where they're this vain type of personality. Hellboy and the Golden Army.
Mm.
Beautiful example for Orion, Stage One, and also Tall White, which would be the two elves that are in that movie. That'd be more Orion, but at the same time, that DNA base came from you had the Orion Greys that created a lot of these different Tall White variations, including the Ebens that made their own regurgitation. Like I said, but Isaac thought it was hilarious. I called him a regurgitation. He thought that was hilarious, but he doesn't like them at all. So it's with this though. I'm trying to think of another example that I've seen recently. Star Trek, biggest one of all time. You see sometime in Next Generation and in Deep Space Nine and Voyager, that you see some tall white variation, reptilian variations. Uh, also one of the better ones as well would be The Time Machine with Guy Pearce and Jeremy Irons. That depicts the Orions, but at the same time also depicts the tall whites living underground. Jeremy Irons' character, where he's highly psionically charged or telepathically charged, where he's sitting in a throne underground. That's a beautiful example of that. The way he there, even that Orion tall white variation was controlling Guy Pearce's timeline to where his species would be created to begin with, and they showed him as a human variation in that particular timeline. They're not entirely wrong, since some of them have hybrided with humans, but also people, you might also notice that in dreams, in your dream walking in dreams, you will more than likely have encountered this particular race, because that and Ebens, Greys, insectoids, we can go through the whole gambit at some point, but like bugs, all of them. But with this, I knew someone that had this dream where she kept going into military bases all the time and looking through people's like shit, like all their personal effects and everything. Part of her was sensing intuitively or telepathically something was up. I came to find this out. Where in the dream state, she was going through people's quarters, all this other stuff, like normal soldiers stuff and everything. What part of her subconscious was doing was seeking what she was picking up on, and this group got mad at her. And in a session, I had to make them back off. I've also found them running little side experiences. You may remember, Aubrey, when we went to Burwell, when we went to the Pebble Creek incident, where you and I were picking up on a racer. That's these guys. So that's these guys that were there. They like to. It's like I always equated that we caught them. We caught them like how you would catch a meth lab out in the woods somewhere, kind of thing. They like to break galactic law on a regular basis, like how some people just like to break the law here, like have a meth lab, sell drugs, do stuff like that. And also there's the soul trade too, which we won't get into that too much. But the Lancaneers have been responsible for also being couriers for hire for the soul trade. And what the soul trade is, in a nutshell, is ghosts are captured here. We spotted that in Burwell that time, where I said they had ghosts in chains, meaning that they carry something around like a little cube that I call a soul arc. They put ghost energy in it. They take it off planet, and they basically sell the ghosts to somebody who is ordering here, like a merchant. Genetics too for the Ebens, by the way, and a couple other races that are out there, like Camino in Star Wars. But they like that race that created the Stormtroopers. You have that genetic that are taken here by races that want it out there, and you have ghosts where they bring them back to their own biosphere. Say if they want a doctor, they want a scientist, they want a warrior, they want a soldier. They go to battlefields for a lot of these. This actually happens. This is unfortunately just as prolific as slavery was in the 1600s and 1700s here on Earth. So if people want to see that, we did a conversation on that. Elder Scrolls, me and Ryan did a lifting episode on the soul trade and soul traffic. It's too long of a conversation to add here. We can retouch on it sometime as well. But I will touch on, I did go into several graveyards, one in Illinois, where I walked through the graveyard and saw ghosts there. They were standing next to their gravestones. And when I asked them why they were doing this, they said the angel told them to stay there, and they were posing like they were a piece of meat. And I was like, no, you need to go on to the afterlife. And they got hostile at that point. No, we have to stay here. The angel told us to do this. And I was like, who are you referring to as an angel? It was one of these guys. I found these guys in hoods, cloaks, everything in graveyards conducting their business. And they actually, believe it or not, if you interfere with their work, they get pissed, but at the same time, they lose whatever funds they were going to get from that haul. This is actually, unfortunately, something that goes on. I believe the soul trade would probably be its own episode. I can't substantiate any of it whatsoever. It's just based on personal experiences. But the Lancaneers are like couriers. Like in Fallout New Vegas, ironically enough, you're the courier that delivers Mr. House's computer chip to him. In that, it's there. They are that for like how you were to Mr. House in that game.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, at least a certain sect of them are. I don't want to judge the entire species, but but if the shoe fits, the same with the Draco. They have a reputation for being evil. 9 times out of 10, they're demons. So it's if the shoe fits. But yeah, these are our encounters with the tall whites. And if you see in commercials anywhere, shows anywhere, you have the almost like silky white hair or black hair, and you have like that painted like look like they've consumed too much colloidal silver type of look. In any show like Defiance, you mentioned Defiance. That's a beautiful example of how they look in that too. We didn't see it, but I remember that look. Uh, and you see these prolifically, like in Star Wars. If you want a good idea of Orion, that would be the Emperor. So, like the old decrepified, like Orion, like from Atlantean period, like look, or ancient look. So, or the sorceress from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs type. But the majority of what you're dealing with now is either military or these various descent lineage races. The majority of encounters, alien wise, that people are having on the Earth aren't alien. They're terrestrial or dimensional. At least about 2 to 5% are galactic still coming in, from what I can understand. Uh, I know I went on, but that's about the ratio from where I understand it. Anyway,
I was trying to look up information on Charles C. Hall to see if he's still alive. I can't really find any too much information on him whenever I do.
look. Also, there's 2 names that pop up for him too, which I find very weird. I've always known him as Charles C. Hall, and his Facebook is Charles C. Hall, but it recently changed to Charles James Hall,
Hmm.
and he has an IMDb for a movie he made in 2020 about walking with tall whites is the name of it. I
Hmm.
have not seen it yet, but the book they based it off of was Millennial Hospitality by Charles Hall. So,
Hmm.
uh, but it's Charles James Hall. It pops up. I'm not sure. Maybe somebody can clarify this out there in the comments if they've seen something we haven't. But the name changed from Charles C. Hall to Charles James Hall, unless he changed his name for publicity or pen names purposes, or it's a Mandela effect of some kind,
Hmm.
or it's like I said, a pen name, or it's Mr. Disinformation. It's one of those 3 categories.
Hmm.
But he may have changed the name for pen name purposes, or maybe people were coming to see him somewhere, or some fans or something found him or something. But he's on Facebook. That I know. I don't know if he's alive or dead still, but it seems possibly the reason you couldn't find anything under Charles C. Hall is because the name switched.
Hmm.
But I found that as of this morning. My intuition has told me look up his name real quick and you'll find something. And I couldn't find too much under C. Hall, but James Hall, yeah.
Hmm.
It started to come up. We're going to try to review that movie at some point. It was made in 2020, the beginning of 2020, and or put out on Amazon, more than likely filmed in 19 or 18.
Hmm.
But yeah, it goes through the story. I
And
can't
he wrote
give
it
a
and
review.
directed it.
Yep, he wrote it direct. And there are there's others here that were the directors. Let me look real fast here. It is yeah, Walking with Tall Whites. The director is Emil Marzizak, and writer is Emil Marzizak, and stars Charles James Hall and Maurice Thuris Hall, his wife, I
Huh.
believe. So, which yeah, he
Is it like more of a
yeah, well,
documentary?
yeah, I'm thinking we're gonna watch it later on and give a report back in the comments or description. Now, another person online that has told this story very, very well. We watch this channel called The Y Files, and AJ, he does a bloody fantastic job telling these stories. He did one on the tall whites of Nelis very recently, and he gave the description of the Lancaneer race beautifully on there. He showed the like AI rendition he did of them and everything, and it was done beautifully. Even the story about the horse, everything, and that was a validation for me when I saw. That's what inspired me to want to talk about my encounters with them on here. Did a beautiful job of telling the story of the tall whites. So I just wanted to plug that. We normally don't name drop, but that particular one, I want to give credit so that people don't think we took all that from his. But he does. AJ, if you hear this, you've done a bloody fantastic job on that material. But I wish we had the resources he did for Conspiracy Sector, but for like the elaborate studio and everything, that'd be awesome. But yeah, it. Did you have anything else to add, Aubrey, before I go into it?
It's pretty. I think we wrapped it up pretty good. If you want to bring in some questioning, I got some interesting ones.
All right, all right. Believe it or not, folks, before this started, I had these beings harassing me, like I said before, and what happened was they were wanting to tell their own story. I don't trust the Lancaneers as far as I can throw them. Uh, they are prolific liars. They cannot be trusted. Any channelings we did with them, I ditched because you cannot trust their material to save your life. So you can usually get it from a variant of other variations of other races that live in the area that can basically kind of tell you what's going on. And humans that have encountered him, like Charles Hall and them, that can be trusted for at least how people are interpreting it. So, okay. Okay, I now open the circle of true benevolence. And if people are correcting me because we didn't open the circle in the beginning, sorry, but I am doing this now for the channel. So, all right. The energy is actually pretty good today for this, believe it or not. So, after the solstice. So, oh yeah, this was being filmed on 6/22/24. That's the day after the solstice. So, and it actually began on the 20th, the middle of the day on the 20th, believe it or not. So, and I didn't know that. I thought it was always the 21st. No, it actually started about 3 or 4 p.m. on the 20th. The solstice did. So, and you'll find that races that want to harass you will do this the most around these times of year because it's so potent. And Halloween, that's why you have this mixed bag. The bad guys don't try anything on Halloween because it's so active. Everybody's active on that day. They get drowned out. So, Isaac, yes, I'll shut up so you can comment. Yes, I gotta make sure it's you because the Lancaneers have been a pain in my butt. So, okay. Hang on, born energy out. Let's see. Hang on, get rid of one thing that's undesirable here. Okay, Isaac, benevolent Isaac only. I wanted Elena and Vesa since they're actually in that area, but they may come in on a different one. But there we go. Benevolent Isaac only. There we go. Yes, he is right to not trust these beings. Again, you don't want to judge a book by its cover, but you judge it by its contents and the quality of the writing and the quality of the character of the hand that penned the material. Charles Hall did see what he said he saw. Even though I work out of Arizona, I quite frequent the Vegas area. So does my brother, who works out of Barstow, the Edwards base there. Mine's Luke. They're all interconnected through even Sandia, New Mexico, up into Colorado, and even into Nebraska, where he's encountered these races. In Vegas, you're dealing with a mixed bag, as he said. Lane and Vessa's people are, yes, they have a similar style with the architecture, with the Southwest. Because guess who taught the Native Americans how to build that style? It was the Tall Whites and Elaine and Vessa's people, where they settled in that area in the early 1900s, late 1800s. Yes, to establish a colony called New Verre, which is both Red Rock Canyon and the Valley of Fire, it is dimensional and introversial in nature. They actually helped some of the original settlers create Vegas, believe it or not. And they quite frequent Vegas. Both these groups frequent Vegas on a constant basis. So therefore saying that they settled in the Nevada area in that time is slightly incorrect because they've been coming and going for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And they also, tall whites fit the Archon description, the 6,000-year-old Archon mythology. Same thing with the return of the Archons in Star Trek, where it was AI based with the AI named Landru, which was the religious teachers of that particular human group that was being controlled by an AI. It had to do with lunar cycles, by the way, but the return of the Archons, saying it happened 6,000 years ago, that reference by Gene Roddenberry was actually referring to the tall whites. This particular group, it pains me to see them having been around them here and various other friends you two know. I do not mention the names because I don't think this person wanted to be mentioned. But anyway, this is them doing this particular psionic bombardment. We do not allow this particular bombardment because the over the top is a violation of multiple galactic treaties and treatises, very much like the assisting of Hitler in World War II by the Orions, by the draconian entities of the time, and also Cassiopean variants, which variations, I don't want to say variant is an actual slur. Lane and Vess's grouping are part human, part Cassiopean. And there's some tall white mixed in there. They are a mixed bag. Again, the architecture is similar. This is where the Native Americans got a lot of this from. And the architecture by which, say, you have the Anastasi with their fortress in the side of the hill there in New Mexico, this in Arizona, all of this that architecture came from both the Cassiopean groups and the Buddhist groups. This is where also some of it is slightly Templar looking in nature. Where do you think, aside from Atlantis, from the Scandinavian groups that came from there, like the Vikings, you have the Sons of Odin, all of that. Where do you think some of that architecture actually came from? Tall white. Before that, it was giants that built the megalithic structures, the builder giants, and Nordic types there. But the more refined down brick looks with the windows and everything, like what he saw when he played his Conan Exiles game and was wondering why he was building something like that in a desert area, he was picking up on how they were all interlocked together and everything, just like Elena Vess's New Ver, which is a mix between that and the Vegas Strip, where all the buildings are interlocked and geometric like Adobe. This is tall white and Cassiopean architecture primarily. So I can go into questions if you like.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting subject, and I want to relate to some of the tall whites' technology. Their suits that they wear that glow, that radiate. They can also levitate with them. Do you know any way of why that works and how it comes about, and what technology might make that a possibility?
Yes. This is psionic resonance technology where they can use their own telekinetic and psionic field and run it through an enhancer and make themselves glow. Also, remember, in your Irish mythology, what were the Tuatha De Danann? They were the shining ones. So there's another relation there. It's another elf group, like the elves in your Lord of the Rings. They retreated to Tir na Og, or the other world of the living. That's also the Interverse, worlds within worlds. But that technology has been around since time immemorial, and it's an enhancer for the person's already natural psionic field. Think of like the Force in this particular way. Their genome does not glow itself. Yes, many jokes have been out there about them, about like the vampires from your Twilight, where they sparkle and all this. This is where the author was channeling some of that from, where Stephanie Meyer and them was getting this from. But on top of this, this technology, which would be a chest plate that also shields them from contaminants. Can they fly with this, kind of like a jetpack? Yes, they can. Can they levitate? Yes, they can. But this is from an already existing enhanced psionic field. This is basically like essentially the Force from Star Wars, where they could literally stop or move objects with their energy. And this is the same identical story that is being told from your Star Wars mythology. And people have dumped on the Acolyte lately, even though it went all wokeified and everything. They're telling the story in the new rendition of how one race created another race with a higher psionic buildup. That would be your Zeta Ebens creating the Lancaneers. This is also the Orions creating some of these different elfish like races that rebelled against them during the Tuathan and Fomorian wars in Ireland in the prehistory. So this is where you're getting the glowing and shining ones. The way this works is it has mimetic qualities to it where it makes contact with the skin. When this happens, it is then through a static charge linked to your skin. They showed this in the Superman animated series where someone had a suit on where they flew around like Superman and had his powers, but it was put right to their skin, even though it drove the person insane because he got a god complex out of it, and Superman had to whoop him in that. Even though he told the scientists in that, keep this up, that I need other law enforcement to be able to use this, and just perfect the technology. And the scientist was pleased. This is very similar, if not the same technology that is being shown as contact with the skin, either through a nanofiber, like how some of the Greys have, or Elena Vessa have, where you could literally touch it, change the color, take the clothes off, everything. This is why Clifford Stone could not see a zipper on some of the Greys' outfits because it was nanofiber woven to the shape of their skin, like a 7 of 9 cat suit kind of deal. With this, you could literally take your own psionic field, speak psionically or telepathically to someone in an enhanced way, and not just have to wear a little crystal on your head like some of these outdated reptilians do, and their little creepy selves under the ground there, with a little unicorn horn sticking out of their forehead. Not the Forbosi group, that's a genetic group that created unicorns. That's a different conversation. But with this, it is a suit that deals with the person's own not only genetic signature that it's genetically tapped into for your own, but is psionically tapped into for their own energetic signatures, like you see in the show Dragon Ball Z, where you see they have a little eyepiece where they're scanning energy signatures and genomic signatures. It's the same thing for the technology itself. And that show is also based off of enhanced psionic fields and enhanced energetic auric fields and internal fields, where you see them gaining great deals of power from calling on spirit and calling on the oversoul, all of these other things. But the technological version for them is essentially it would essentially look like magic to an earlier people on Earth. I hate to say this to himself, but primarily some beings that he was conversing with in Nebraska were this group these groups primarily, and also some of the ones that were Tuathan based. They're not elves per se. This is why when his friend Richie and him were talking about elves, some of the other beings that were around that weren't them were snickering. The term is not elves. It is the different tall white races that had this particular technology. Then you lump them together into a Tuathan category of elf, and they are essentially the shining ones because primarily of this piece of technology. And this can accomplish anything from levitation to the enhanced force abilities to communication, all of the above.
And I know Hall would talk about, when it comes to their suits and it's kind of an armor that's unfathomable to to the human mind. We just wear bulletproof vests. But he would describe that if a rock was thrown, it would like at full speed, throw a rock as hard as you can. It'd go right to the suit, about an inch away from the suit, and drop to the ground. It's like an anti-gravitic sort of, I don't know how to describe it like you did, but just very strange and very amazing, when you think about it. And I want to go from their armor, their protective but wear, to their weaponry. Their ray guns and the different components. He would state that it would shoot like a beam of iodine and would make a human bleed from the inside out. So how does that technology work when it comes to the weaponry that they are supposed to possess?
Yeah, like with the rock you said, though, it would literally cancel out its kinetic energy and make it drop like the force But with the weapon, with the gun, with the iodine weapon, this is probably a cruel invention that they're more sadistic, let's say, scientists among them who came up with. It was partially accurately depicted in your Star Trek The Next Generation program, not the phasers, but there was one in particular. You see Data getting a hold of him and was going to fire at this one person who had captured him to put in a museum. Essentially, this is how Lancaneers would act too, by the way. This is also the attitude that was being depicted, this opulent bullshit that was being depicted in that episode, where this guy kills someone with a little weapon that was outlawed by the Federation. This was being accurately depicted as this same iodine gun, but only this version was like a thumb version where you push the button on the back. There's all variations with triggers, machine, like almost rifle looking, phaser looking, all of it. And what the iodine does is exactly what was depicted in next Star Trek Next Generation, where a pellet or a stream of iodine would go in and literally cancel out some of the molecules in the body and the blood, everything, and break them down and cancel them out completely, like how acid cancels out flesh and other materials put into it. And it is an extremely painful death. You get fired upon by one of these, it spreads like inside of you very quickly, like a flesh-eating bacteria, and will literally vaporize you from the inside out very slowly. That's what was being depicted on Next Generation as well.
Very interesting. And just to pick up one more question in relation to the guns, do you believe that that has been reversed technologically for the human race in some which way, shape, fashion, and form? You know, I know there's certain types of laser weaponry that we have now, but is there something that can emit like a chemical compound like what their weapons did that you think that we possess today in the human world?
Yes, humans have a rudimentary version uh, of this particular type of technology. It's more like an acid weapon that would actually corrode locks. Soldiers use it as like a spray gun type of deal to corrode doorknobs and locks off of doors to be able to kick them in. Kind of like you have a can of WD-40 and you spray it on something. This has the same identical iodine and acidic compound that the tall whites gave them. Yes, there are some weapons, but they don't come close to what the tall whites use. Now, this may surprise you. Your fiber optics came from the tall whites. What you use for communications and telecommunications, in that respect, even though it was the Nazis and the Orions stuff that came up with the other, this came from a crashed spaceship many years ago, whereas they saw these luminescent fibers in there. They back engineered it, and this is how they created fiber optic and the fiber optics network. Or you have those kids' toys where it has the fiber optic color, like pom pom type of deal, and flashlight type of deal. This actually came from their technology as a form of conduits inside of some of the ships. You see this on Next Generation as well, where there was a scene where somebody was asking, well, where do I get more of this luminescent fiber? And Worf pulls down a handful. He goes, from anywhere, and he hands it to them. This was a Next Generation episode that was supposed to be a type of War Games episode where they had an old derelict Federation ship that had the cords hanging everywhere. That is what happened in the actual down UFO. You had the fiber optic cables hanging everywhere. This was back engineered, analyzed, back engineered, and now you have fiber optics. The weapons are no different, but there are restrictions on what soldiers can and cannot have. Earthly, regular Army, Navy, Marine, and Coast Guard, all of them. They have some of this, especially Army has, like I said, the spray, like with the straw, like can of WD-40, they spray around, it foams, and then the doorknob or lock or whatever will fall right off the door. It's like almost like a can of silly string, which also that also came. Silly string came from some of those variations as well. It was used to create a prank toy, and eventually soldiers used it to see tripwire lines for mines. But that substance, the recipe for that, what came from also a tall white variation of a story, and also crashed spaceships. The one that did crash that had the fiber optics was a tall white vessel that crashed in the desert, whereas the crash was more directed toward by somebody else that actually had humanity more in mind. And I do want to say, though, my own physiology. Yes, I am human, but I have a bit of Elven. He sees Elven. He himself has an Elven line in him. That would be tall white. I have also the same thing. My mother, unfortunately, I would just say unfortunately because she's a sadistic bitch. I am just saying that she was also tall white, but one with more darker hair that she could change the nanofibers in the hair to go blonde or black hair. This is all I will say about that. Ironically, her name was Jewel, which like a jewel of the cosmos, like how all the tall whites think of themselves. They're very vain, and they follow their Orion forebears in that particular way.
Very good. Appreciate the information. Thanks for popping through.
Yes, thank you. Even though at first I loathed that he was connecting to this, intuitively I knew he needed to, and you guys needed to say this material. As soon as he saw that Y-Files episode, it triggered this, and I know spirit-wise, it was more synchronistic, and Spirit had other ideas in mind so that this information would be spread. But sometimes there is backlash for these things. So if you've experienced a little bit mentally and a little bit physically from this, and other friends of yours have and his have, this is a bit why, but because this information is coming out and the way that it's being spoken, if 2 or more people start to spread the information, it gets heard and it gets felt in what you call the benevolent earthly akashic and benevolent galactic akashics. It gets grounded in that way. You've heard the phrase 2 or more walk in my name, minus the religious connotation, the co-creatability of multiple people, like those ones that sat on the White House Mall or the Washington Mall and just meditated, and it dropped crime on the planet by at least 10 to 15% for a few hours. This is the concept that I am speaking of. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Oh, man. Yeah, for some reason, my eye keeps curling in over on this side. There's this weird wrinkle forming where it curls in, and when I channel, it curls in even further. And imagine if your lower eyelid curled in and poked you in the lower part of the eyeball. That's why I keep doing that. And this part of this, tear duct here is what I got affected in the SS Secret Space Program and some various alien things too. So this one waters, it squirts crap on my glasses all the time. So if people see me adjusting my eye here and see my eye is like drooping here, that's why. There was something going on with the nerve here where it keeps, when I channel it curls in. So I don't know why the body reacts in weird and stupid and creepy ways sometimes when you do this kind of work. And it's fixable. You just tone it. You go through like toning and it fixes it. But it's annoying is what it is. So and I've recently started on new supplements and new ways of recharging myself electrolyte wise and everything. So the body is reacting like, what? You're actually helping and fixing stuff. So so I would recommend anybody gets into this work, you have to attune the body correctly for this work. And the body, mind, spirit, soul, everything. If you don't, you're going to pay for it. So, and this also helps fight beings that are malicious as well when you're in a more healthy state as well. They don't want you to be out of that state because they've added the poisons in so that you aren't a psionic match for them. Or psionic dampening with technology, you have to surpass all of these things. So,
nice.
Yeah.
Be sure to always do that. Once again, he's spot on. If you're not taking any supplements and you're not taking care of yourself, you're going to be dark and dwindled, and you're going to go down a deep, dark path that you don't want to try to even crawl back out of. So just take care of yourself and try to avoid all the dangers that are hidden within this world. But
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I don't know if you have anything else to add before we take this out today.
I was just going to say I want to thank you all for joining again. We hope you learned something today. It's a very interesting story, and if you want to dive on into it, look at some of the interviews with Charles C. Hall. But thanks for joining.
Yeah, and thanks for joining us. And now you are leaving the conspiracy sector. So bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
To give context, what was said about South Park being right was that episode where the forest people mentioned, where the kids find out that Earth is a reality show and there are multiple species that were planted here on the Earth, and every race is from a different planet, and that the one first alien they meet, the one that Cartman makes him turn into a taco poop and ice cream, it was actually a joke. That is actually, the whole thing was a true story. They wanted to eventually they canceled the reality show, but then the kids advocate for it, blackmail the two aliens, one green thing sucking on another green thing. That reference, that's a cabal blackmailing somebody into action. That's what that spelled, but the rest of it was Earth being a seed world. That's what was being referenced. South Park was right. That's what was being referenced. So 101 schooling, yeah, is triple twos, and also it's the 22nd today. So it's 2:22 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Saturday, June 22nd, 2024. Thank you.